In this guide, I'm going to give you the quick and dirty explanation and rundown on every single notable trash pull and every single boss in Nokhud Offensive so that you can time your next key easier and raise your IO score. The guy that you really want to focus on in this fight is called Nokhud Lancemaster. He has 3 abilities that you want to watch out for. His first ability is called War Stomp, which you absolutely want to avoid because it will do tons of damage to you. His second ability is called Disruptive Shout, which does damage to everyone and also interrupts spellcasting. You're going to want to kick this one. Finally, he has a frontal ability called Cleaving Strikes, which will do damage to you if you're standing near the tank, so just don't stand near the tank. After you clear out all the ads surrounding the ballistas, Granith will land and you'll be able to begin the fight. Granith is a relatively simple fight with one main gimmick that involves the ballistas. Periodically throughout the fight, Granith will try to cast Eruption, and you have to activate a ballista to stun him to stop that from going off. You'll know what ballista you have to activate because there'll be a friendly NPC at that ballista that will tell you that it's ready to fire. Honestly, it's sort of the job of range damage and or healer to get this off, because if you're a melee DPS, you have to sacrifice a lot of DPS to run all the way over to that ballista, then run all the way back. There's also these saboteurs that occasionally spawn that will run over to the ballista and destroy it. You have to stun these guys, slow them, CC them, whatever you need to do to kill them before they can get to that ballista. Now let's move on to Granith's abilities. The ability he did right there is called Tectonic Stomp, and that will absolutely kill you if you're within that radius when that goes off. The second ability that he does is called Shards of Stone, which if you can react to it, you should pop a defensive for it to make your healer's job easier. The main thing your group should be worrying about during this fight is making sure those saboteurs don't get to the ballistas and activating the ballistas to interrupt Granith when he tries to cast Eruption. The first group of ads you fight before Raging Tempest is the Stormcallers. For this fight, you always want to focus on Storm Speaker and primarily interrupting Tempest. Tempest does massive AoE damage to everyone, and this should be your #1 priority to kick. Finally, if you ever see the corners of your screen go dark, that means you're taking damage, and you should run out of that as soon as possible. I'll let the clip speak for itself for this first part. Okay, this Thunder Beast, yeah, that's what would insta-kill me right there. That is so annoying. Thunderclap is an ability that has one-shotted me more times than I cared to admit, and honestly, you just gotta not be careless and look out for when it's being cast. Second thing you gotta watch out for with Thunder Beast is he casts Chain Lightning, and honestly, that's just unavoidable AoE damage, so if you have a defensive, you should cast it here. Raging Tempest is a sort of relatively straightforward boss, but it does have a pretty annoying mechanic that you do have to watch out for. Periodically, Raging Tempest will spawn a bunch of orbs around the arena. After he spawns them, you have about 5 to 10 seconds to soak them. If you don't soak them, they turn into electric puddles, which will do crazy amounts of damage to you if you step in them. There is a silver lining to these orbs though. When you pick up an orb, you gain a damage bonus, and this bonus stacks with every orb that you pick up. However, I wouldn't advise picking up every orb that you can see, because when the damage buff expires, you take damage equivalent to how many stacks you accumulated. This means that if you went too overboard, you can very easily die. The last mechanic that you have to worry about with this boss is this boss will give every player a debuff that causes a wide blue circle to appear around them. Each circle only does sort of a relatively small amount of damage, but if you're all stacked up, it will wipe you very easily. So make sure you spread out and make sure no one else is in your circle. After the Raging Tempest, it's time for Tira and Maruk. Before you can fight the boss, you have to kill the 4 groups that have Soul Harvesters in them, and you can find these guys on the hilltops. In each group, there's really 2 mobs you have to worry about. The first mob is the Soul Harvester, and the second mob is the Ukel Will Crusher. The Soul Harvester periodically casts Deathbolt Volley, which you should interrupt at all costs as it does massive party-wide damage. Now, the main thing to worry about with the Will Crusher is that he'll periodically cast Domination. You should really prioritize kicking this, as if it goes off, he'll mind control a random party member and they'll begin attacking you. Finally, keep an eye on the bird enemies because they can very easily one-shot you with their frontal abilities. After you clear out the 4 Soul Harvester groups, you can finally fight Tira and Maruk. This is a combination boss, so when your tank groups the 2 enemies up, you should use your cleave abilities to maximize damage and speed up the fight. There are 3 abilities you have to worry about in this fight. First ability is called Frightful Roar, which will look like a purple circle. If you remain in this circle when the ability goes off, you'll be feared for a couple seconds. The second ability is called Gale Arrow. In this clip right here, I actually failed the ability, and the reason why I did is because I wasn't perfectly stacked on top of my teammate. Which leads me into the 2 ways you can avoid this ability. The first way is to have all your teammates stack on top of each other. If you do this, all the tornadoes will spawn away from you and you'll be in the clear. The second way to avoid this ability is to have everyone spread out as far as possible so you have the maximum amount of time to react. The last ability you gotta worry about in this fight is called Earth Splitter. Maruk will slam the ground and create earthquake puddles. This ability is pure physical damage, so pop a physical immunity if you have one and you can just completely ignore it. Keep in mind though, these puddles do damage even after the initial blast, so make sure to avoid them. Right after the Tira and Maruk fight, you can skip directly to Balakar Khan. To do this, mount up on your dragon and start flying for the mountains in front of Tira and Maruk's arena. It's important to keep in mind that you can only do the skip if you've killed enough percentage before Balakar Khan, and that percentage is roughly 95-ish%. It's also important you aim right to the left of this Stormcaller right here, and you should be good to go. Balakar Khan is a straightforward boss that has 2 phases with an intermission in between where you have to speedily kill adds before they kill you. In his first phase, the Khan will cast Iron Spear on a random target in your party, then immediately charge at the location where he threw his spear. It's important you don't get caught in his charge, or you probably will get one-shotted. The Khan will also cast Upheaval, which is a frontal ability that will also one-shot you if you get caught in it. In the intermission phase, the Khan will activate all the adds around him, and I recommend allowing the tank to gain threat on these adds before damaging them down. At the same time, you should pop all the damaging cooldowns you have access to and cleave these adds down as soon as possible, because if you don't, they will kill you pretty quickly. In Balakar's second phase, Iron Spear transforms into Static Spear. The only difference between these 2 abilities is that Static Spear does more damage and pulls all of your group members to the location where he threw his spear. Also, watch me save this guy's life with lay on hands.
Ooh, quick kill right there.
The last mechanic that the Khan does is give every player a debuff that causes blue circles to appear around them. As soon as you see this, keep in mind that a damaging puddle will spawn on you soon and you need to run out of the puddle as soon as it does. One last thing to note is that occasionally you'll see these blue puddles on the ground, and those are lightning strikes, and you need to avoid them at all costs because they are pretty heavily damaging. If you've gotten this far, thanks for watching. Let me know down in the comments if you do any of these pulls or bosses differently, and good luck on your next Mythic Plus key.